The Unknown Story, written by Zheng Chang and John Halliday, is a highly controversial biography of Mao Zedong, the founding father of the People's Republic of China. First published in 2005, the book presents a highly critical perspective on Mao's life and rule, challenging the conventional narratives about his leadership, revolutionary accomplishments, and personal motivations. The biography is based on extensive research, including interviews with former Communist Party officials, declassified Soviet archives, and first-hand testimonies. However, its credibility has been questioned by scholars, with some arguing that it portrays Mao in an overly negative light and lacks balanced historical analysis. This 1,200-word essay explores the book's main arguments, its portrayal of Mao, the sources it uses, and the controversy surrounding its publication. It also examines how the book fits into the broader historiography of Mao and the Chinese Communist Revolution. The authors and their perspective. Zheng Chang, best known for her memoir Wild Swans, which recounts her family's experiences during China's political upheavals, is openly critical of Mao. Having personally suffered under his rule, she presents him as a tyrant who had no genuine ideological convictions and was solely driven by a lust for power. Her husband and co-author John Halliday is a historian specializing in Chinese and Soviet history. Together, they present a Mao who is not the brilliant strategist often depicted in Chinese official accounts, but a ruthless opportunist willing to sacrifice millions for his own benefit. Their perspective is clear from the outset. Mao is not only responsible for the suffering of the Chinese people, but is also depicted as a Machiavellian figure who manipulated allies, betrayed friends, and deceived the world to maintain his grip on power. Unlike some other Western biographers of Mao who offer a more nuanced assessment, Mao, the Unknown Story, leaves little room for ambiguity. Mao is portrayed as a villain with almost no redeeming qualities. Main themes and arguments. The book is structured as a chronological biography, tracing Mao's life from his early years in Hunan province to his death in 1976. The authors argue that Mao was driven from an early age by a deep desire for absolute power, with little regard for ideology or genuine concern for China's peasants. Mao's rise to power, betrayal and opportunism. One of the book's key arguments is that Mao was not the selfless revolutionary leader he claimed to be. Instead of being a visionary who led the Communist Party to victory against both the nationalists and the Japanese, he is depicted as a cunning manipulator who used deception, terror, and alliances of convenience to outmaneuver his rivals. The Long March, 1934 to 1935, one of the most celebrated events in Communist Party history, is reinterpreted as a propaganda myth rather than an epic journey of survival and heroism. According to the authors, Mao did not lead a miraculous escape, but was allowed to retreat by the nationalists, who had been instructed by Chiang Kai-shek to let the communists go in exchange for the safety of his own son, who was held hostage in the Soviet Union. This claim challenges the widely accepted narrative that Mao's leadership during the Long March cemented his role as the head of the Communist Party. Additionally, Chang and Halliday argue that Mao's consolidation of power within the Communist Party was achieved through brutal purges and calculated betrayals, rather than through ideological superiority or military genius. They emphasize that he regularly eliminated rivals, including those who had been instrumental in the early communist movement, such as Zhang Guotao and Wang Ming. Soviet influence and Mao's dependence on Stalin. Another controversial claim in the book is that Mao was heavily dependent on Soviet support and that his rise would not have been possible without Stalin's backing. Unlike the official Communist Party narrative, which portrays Mao as an independent leader who resisted both Soviet and Western imperialism, Mao, the Unknown Story, argues that Mao frequently acted as a puppet of Stalin, receiving weapons, funds, and strategic advice from Moscow. The authors contend that Mao's ultimate goal was not to improve China, but to turn it into a militarized state that could rival the Soviet Union and the West. In their view, Mao was more interested in expanding his personal power than in implementing Marxist-Leninist principles for the good of the people. The Great Leap Forward and the Famine. One of the most damning sections of the book deals with the Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962. Mao's attempt to rapidly industrialize China and collectivize agriculture. The policy resulted in one of the deadliest famines in human history, with an estimated 30 to 45 million deaths. While mainstream historians generally agree that Mao's policies contributed to the disaster, Mao, the unknown story, goes further by arguing that Mao was fully aware of the famine's consequences, but deliberately continued the policies to strengthen his control over the countryside. Chang and Halliday describe Mao as indifferent to human suffering, citing instances where he lived in luxury while millions starved. They argue that he prioritized exporting grain to the Soviet Union over feeding his own people, seeing mass starvation as an acceptable price for his vision of industrialization. This portrayal contrasts with other interpretations that attribute the famine to a combination of ideological rigidity, bureaucratic failures, and misinformation reaching Mao. The Cultural Revolution, a calculated strategy of terror. The Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, is often seen as one of the most chaotic and violent periods in modern Chinese history. It involved purges, mass persecution, and the destruction of traditional Chinese culture. Mao, the unknown story, argues that the Cultural Revolution was not an ideological movement, but a calculated political maneuver designed by Mao to eliminate his rivals and reassert his dominance after the failures of the Great Leap Forward. According to the authors, Mao manipulated China's youth, encouraging them to form the Red Guards and attack counter-revolutionaries, many of whom were longtime Communist Party officials. They argue that Mao orchestrated this turmoil with full awareness of the destruction it would cause, using it as a means to create an atmosphere of fear that would prevent any potential challenges to his authority. Mao's personal life, cruelty, and indulgence. In addition to political analysis, the book delves into Mao's personal life, portraying him as a hedonist who engaged in sexual relationships with numerous young women while neglecting his family. He is depicted as being unconcerned with personal hygiene, indulging in excessive luxuries while the majority of the population suffered. This focus on Mao's personal depravity is one of the more sensational aspects of the book, contributing to its controversial reputation, criticism, and controversy. Despite its extensive research, Mao, the unknown story, has been criticized by many historians for being overly one-sided and selective in its use of sources. Critics argue that while Mao's actions undoubtedly led to immense suffering, the book fails to acknowledge any positive contributions he may have made, such as modernizing China's infrastructure, increasing literacy, and unifying the country after decades of warlordism and foreign occupation. Scholars such as Andrew Nathan, Timothy Cheek, and Jonathan Spence have pointed out that the book often relies on anecdotal evidence and unverified claims, making it difficult to separate fact from speculation. Some have accused the authors of cherry-picking sources to fit their narrative, rather than providing a balanced assessment of Mao's legacy. Furthermore, Chinese scholars and officials have dismissed the book as anti-communist propaganda, arguing that it distorts history to serve a political agenda. Since its publication, the book has been banned in China, further fueling debates about censorship and historical memory. Conclusion. Mao, the Unknown Story, is a provocative and controversial biography that challenges the traditional image of Mao Zedong. It presents a dark and uncompromising view of his leadership, portraying him as a ruthless dictator whose primary goal was personal power rather than national progress. While the book has been praised for its detailed research and compelling narrative, it has also been criticized for its bias, lack of nuance, and reliance on questionable sources. Whether one agrees with its conclusions or not, the book remains an important contribution to the ongoing debate about Mao's legacy. It serves as a counterpoint to official Chinese narratives and forces readers to confront the darker aspects of one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. However, to fully understand Mao's role in history, it is essential to read multiple perspectives rather than relying solely on one interpretation.